Hi everyone, welcome. Today we're checking in on my two brand newest systems all the way over there on the far right on the bottom. That's where we're currently running our mixed red worms. You might remember the mixed red worms were the ones in their old environment that were in a single tub, but we had enough worms here to launch off two new systems. And then we even did a little baiting of straggler worms that didn't manage to get included in the initial haul out and launch of the systems. So as recently as last check-in, we even added more worms. But at this point, these systems are independent of their old environment or their old system anymore. Up until last check-in, we were still tied to that by bringing over the straggler worms, but now we're officially untethered from our history. So to make some new interesting memories with these worms, at least, we've decided to focus on giving them only one type of food. And something I normally don't do, but it was an idea I got in the comments when I put the question out there, what can we do with these systems to set them apart? So we've decided to feed them only coffee. So they're only going to be fed coffee going forward. Last time we started with that whole theme, and today I got some more coffee for them. So let's get these systems up on the bench and get to feeding them. So you got to admit, feeding coffee alone, I think, will eventually lead to pretty dull coloration in my videos, and I think that's just something we have to expect. Most of the stuff they get as bedding is already brown, whether it's paper or leaves, and well, now the food that they're going to be getting fed is also going to be brown. Although, well, you know, we could always dress things up. I actually spent a little bit of time trying to shred different colored paper collections that I had, so perhaps we'll try to liven things up here a little bit by adding bedding that's not coffee filters, because that was one of the starting ideas, was that the only food they would get is coffee and that the only bedding they would get was coffee filters. But I don't know if I can come up with enough bulk coffee filters to sustain that sort of a plan. I might be able to, but I figured it would be probably better for the system in general if we allowed for a little latitude on that, so they'll keep getting coffee filters for sure, but other bedding as well. And then the food will, for the most part, here I keep putting little qualifying statements in here, will, you know, for the most part be coffee, but I could also see doing some of the things that I do down here on a regular basis anyway, such as, you know, including a little bit of worm chow along with the coffee. I just like to do that sometimes anyway, so I think that could sort of spill into here and allow for a little bit of deviation from coffee only as far as the feedings go. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect, you know. 10 days between check-ins, I usually go with greater amounts of time than just that. But it does seem like we've come back in a short enough period of time that they're still sort of working on the last meal they got. So we do have a little bit of a worm party going on here. Alright, sometimes a worm or two drops off, and then I find myself so focused on trying to make sure that they don't end up in between the bins and on the bench in a dangerous spot that I kind of lose interest in the gawking of the worm party that we barged in on. So that was kind of cool. Coffee, for some reason, is just one of those things that I don't really expect much from as far as a reaction from the worms for some reason. I don't know why. A lot of people insist that, you know, it's the sort of stuff that they totally love, the coffee. I think Captain Matt even kind of had a video where he talks about it as like the secret food substance that all the worms really love. As you can see, we've already bumped into a number of coffee filters, and you know, the coffee filter that was out here on top, marking where we last fed, our feeding zone indicator, I believe can just get recycled with the rest of those other bits and pieces of paper to help us build up the feeding zone. I guess the only thing that sort of predated this little coffee experiment was some corn cob, which the worms seem to be busy working on. They're just kind of sliding right in and out of the middle of this piece of corn cob. I'm sure the other ones are the same. And I don't know why I've always got this thing where I don't want to interfere with the breakdown of the corn cobs. It's just interesting to watch how the worms make their way through it without any help. But I think for this go around I was already trying to get myself psyched up to not allow that to happen and not avoid these corn cobs and try to avoid breaking them or splitting them or breaking them up or anything. I figured that with these, as soon as it became possible to do so, that I would start helping those corn cobs along. So, all right, well, I think we are set to go explore bin number 2. Let's see how things over there look. Now, I guess the other consideration with this sort of special approach to feeding these wormies is the fact that usually the foods I provide are juicy in some way. You know, most fruits and vegetables have a good bit of moisture content, and when they're introduced into the worm bins and they begin breaking down, they emit moisture into the system, which we don't have any of here. So we're gonna have to compensate for that, I believe. So there's going to be appearances of my water bottle at the check-ins of this pair of systems here, I believe. Even if my other systems don't require any boost to their moisture here, I believe we're going to have to stay on top of it right from the start. So we shall be dampening, that's for sure. All right. I had a couple wormies that looked like they were about to drop off my hand, so I figured before that occurs, we would just bring it into that little short geeking out session. And you know, since we've been always trying to maintain consistency when I have paired up bins like this, I figured let's do the same over here. Now that we've reduced the corn cob count in bin number 1, let's match the idea here. And I believe that all those chunks of corn cob right there that we just created are not going to be easily recognized in the future as corn cob any longer. So now we're down to 2. And it's interesting because in another couple bins I was running corn cobs where I actually knew the day that they were added to the systems, and we tracked their progress, and it took over a year before we got to the point where the last of the corn cobs had kind of broken up and became unrecognizable as corn cobs anymore. But they were able to hold out for over a year, which was quite amazing. So let's get to feeding these little guys. It's just such a different approach here, it seems, for some reason, knowing that I've got to make sure I dampen here to keep things happy and healthy. And it seemed to me like these large chunks of cardboard that came over from I guess from their migration, sort of an artifact of the horizontal migration that was used to lure them out of their castings in their old environment. It was brought over here and split up. So each system got a chunk of it, but I think it's going to be a good landing pad for a good bit of moisture. And you know, let's not forget, we've got another feeding zone indicator over here too that's getting repurposed. And you know what? More dry stuff. Let's throw in a little bit of colorful bedding, green, white, and red. Or red, white, and green if you want to think of it that way, which are the Hungarian flag's colors. I know that because I'm Hungarian. Here you can see my red actually is a combination of red and pink, but I'll save a little bit of this for after we've thrown in the portion for today. It's really just a single day's worth of coffee. So in these systems it does seem like the food that they're going to be getting is going to be very consistent and maybe borderline boring. So perhaps it is the bedding that we're going to need to, you know, play around with and treat differently each time to keep things interesting in these systems. So I followed through on my idea of dressing up the coffee with a little bit of worm chow, and then the grit. I don't even know if it's something that the worms necessarily need when their only diet is coffee. Grit, yeah, I'm assuming they probably need it. And at this point, some of the leaves that were sprinkled out onto the top surface here get to be blended in now. They've been in here now for 10 days, just sort of resting out on the top surface. Now they really get to take part in the whole system here and become bedding integrated into the material at large rather than just sitting out on the surface. And let's not forget, we've got to come in here with a good bit of moisture. I'm not going to focus the moisture that we're adding to the feeding zone only. I believe that the entire system would benefit greatly from getting a little dousing. So we'll take that approach. And I hope, yeah, I believe we've got a good bit of pressure in the squirt bottle. So let's grab that. What's this? Oh, pumpkin stem. Yeah, I remember finding the pumpkin stem in bin number 1 and bin number 2. It just sort of went under the radar. I didn't even notice that I hadn't bumped into it. But let's get moisture in here, and then we'll be more or less done. Alright, that's quite a bit of water I've added, I believe, I hope. Hopefully it's enough. And yeah, as long as we were kind of going around and around, I took the opportunity to rinse off the walls of the tubs as well as my glove. That much less work to be done over at the sink when it's cleanup time. So we're done here feeding the mixed red worms. And the only other thing I'm wondering about is whether we would do better covering up here with something other than paper. These are those sugar bags that are double layered paper, and this is doing a really fine job holding moisture in, but it does seem like we could even be doing better if we had plastic covers. But for now, we're just gonna go slow in terms of making changes. I think we're gonna be okay here for now, for a while, especially if we keep supplementing the moisture content. So we'll adapt as needed. For now, I think we're good as is. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.